Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we come to you every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and every second and fourth Mondays we are preceding the program called Satori's Black History Corner that comes on around 3:30 and lasts about 30 minutes. This is the last Monday of the month, and I don't think this is the fourth Monday. Are they coming in today, John, in terms?
No, I think they're here last week.
They're here last week.
Yeah, so
Okay, so
I don't know. It's like that's a question. I don't
were
know.
they here last week? Anyway, if
Yeah.
it's the fourth, you can go and look at your calendar. If it's the fourth Monday, then we'll be preceding the program called Satori's Black History Corner. But I think this is not the fourth Monday. We'll let you figure that out. That's too technical for those of us here. We're trying to put the program on that we're doing, and that's enough. That's a mouthful. What I'm going to be doing today, at least in part, is picking up on a couple of points made this morning. I was a guest on a radio program. I think they called me whenever the regular host is not there. Then they call me to fill in, and I don't know why I punished myself. I go in as a conservative on the program, and I'm wrong just for opening my mouth, and so I had to sit there and suffer through some of the comments that were being made by this one gentleman that is the liberal on the program. He's one of the panelists. And I have to tell you, every time I have an encounter where I have to sit there and listen to a liberal for what amounted to 2 hours, that's almost like I feel like I can kind of feel what the crucifixion must have felt like, because I always feel like I'm being crucified in these conversations, because I just think that they, and particularly when you're a black conservative, because I think that what liberals think is that when they find a black conservative, because our voice is so different from the voice of the majority, you know how it is, majority rules. So, so because the minority voice of the minority group is not heard that much, when they hear it, they automatically do the genuflecting in terms of the voice has got to be wrong, because we've not heard that before, and what is he talking about? And it's kind of comical, because I'm going to defend what I say, and I am not going to go along with the noise makers just because the noise makers make more noise out there.
I had a thought about black conservatives. I think about this too because I know people give you, crap for who you are. And a person who grew up in meager means, very humble origins, I think that would be. I think most blacks, if they truly did grow up in that and didn't appreciate having to face all these obstacles, once they obtain success or a great deal of success, like you have, you went on your life, you would have this place, this instrument in place that says, well, this is going to cost me this much. I'm not going to be able to do that if I do this. And so there's kind of this built-on limiting thing in there, and you're going to be a conservative because you just know you only got so many hours a day to work. Well, the liberal blacks are the people who embrace that. The blacks who still embrace it are usually part of the system in one fashion. They're either the recipients or the people who will keep that stuff in place so the recipients look up towards them. So if you look at anybody who's considered the Uncle Tom, would be the blacks that serve the system the way it is now, not the person who's saying, you could do much better, believe me. That's, the Uncle Tom would say, go along to play along to go along, be humble and all that stuff and play it. If a person's a true self-actualized human, they're saying, I can do better. I don't have to have this meager existence. And that's exactly what it seems like those liberal whites want all blacks to embrace, is the true, I would say, the Uncle Tom mentality.
Mm-hmm. That is very true, and it's an embracement of the victimization mentality, where you're supposed to see yourself as a victim, overwhelmed by all of this racism that's supposed to be extant in the American environment, and you are overwhelmed by it and can't get past it. And that's what explains the debilitation conditions, the debilitating conditions we see in the urban community throughout the country. Racism is supposed to explain it. And that was one of the topics that came up this morning on this radio program. I guess they started out with this topic because of what they call racial profiling. Because yesterday they had a meeting in one of the churches, area churches here in Flint, and they were discussing the profiling that's going on in the city. They were saying it is not so much the local police, but now that we brought in state troopers, supposedly they're not sensitive enough because they don't normally operate in the community. So they're out here profiling. But the question that they didn't raise on the program was, why are the state troopers here in the first place? I mean, they came in because the situation in the city of Flint has overwhelmed the local police force, so the state has applied some state troopers in the Flint environment because of the crime rate, and now they want to have a discussion about racial profiling. Why are they in here in the first place in the city, and why is there a need to bring the state troopers in? They're not bringing them in Grand Blanc, for example. So what has anybody answered the question about why we have state troopers in the city of Flint? But my discussion this morning was to challenge the very notion of racial profiling, because I don't think racial profiling exists. And I know what happened this morning. I knew what was going to happen when I said that, because I don't think that there's any profiling you can place upon a race. And if there is racial profiling and there's a profile that fits the race as a group, what is the profile? I want you to answer that question. Because if you're talking about racial profiling as it relates to blacks, I would have you know that blacks as a group have people in it, such as, and let me name some of the people. You tell me which one of those persons are being profiled out here. Benjamin Carson is black. Colonel West is black. Alan West of Florida, the former representative from Florida, he's black. What about, let's see, let me name some of the others. David Webb, he's a black person. Condoleezza Rice, okay, that's a black female. So let's make sure we kind of even it up in terms of gender. Okay, what's the profile? I'll wait right here for the answer, because you're talking gibberish, you don't even know it.
It's like, well, if anybody engages in it, it would be the leftists, because if you're a white male, you're automatically a country club member who's a multimillionaire who wants to harass the minorities. I mean, they just look at your skin and automatically assume you have all this stuff. And if you don't have what they expect of you, they look at you with like, why don't you? Don't you know you're supposed to be all on board? You know, you're all supposed to be on the same train, you know?
Yeah, and the profiling in all of these cases is individuated to those particular individuals. When let's say that they are quote unquote profiling that particular person, they've looked at him and they've discerned some things that they have a question about, and they want to make a stoppage, and all of that is what Eric Holter said in his report about the police officers in Ferguson, that they were racially profiling blacks because look at the disparate impact, which Thomas Sowell calls it a disparate impact racket. And it is a racket where you look at how many times have you stopped this group and how many times have you stopped another group, and then if there's any differential statistics, analysis that's made, then the statistics, if there's some variance between the two groups, then you make the conclusion that what explains is racial profiling. You don't need any other data, just the fact that they're blacks and they're whites and got two different statistics to verify that there's what explains it is racial profiling. Well, maybe and maybe not. The point is that, and Coulter makes this point in her in an article she just recently did, where she was talking about there are only 2 studies that have been made about speeding, since that's the claim that was made in this report by Eric Holder, 105 pages of nonsense. And he was saying that the disparity in these numbers indicates that the Ferguson police force was racially profiling the blacks in Ferguson, and that explains what these numbers are about. And it's very interesting to me that in the 105-page report, which was 29 pages longer than the 86-page report, where they exonerated Darren Wilson. So on the one hand, the individual that they came in to find make a racial claim in the first place, they had to exonerate the officer because the evidence was very clear. I mean, it was very clear to me before they made the report available to the public that you can't take an officer's gun and expect him to try to take the officer's gun, and he stands there waiting for you to take his gun and then shoot him with his own weapon. And that if he in fact reacted to that by stopping the person from doing so, and given all the extenuating circumstances, knowing what the case was really about and what the evidence was found by the grand jury in Ferguson, and then it was in fact reinforced by the investigation made by the DOJ's office, which was the finding of the same they came to the same conclusion. But then exonerating the officer, what Eric Holder's office did was wait until they completed another report, larger in its content. I think the size of it also has something to do with them trying to make it look like they were making a claim that had some integrity to it and something that was legitimate. 29 pages longer than the one that exonerated Darren Wilson, where they exonerated the individual officer, then made an indictment of the entire police force, and look at the disparate numbers as a way of making that determination. I looked at it the same way Larry Elder looked at it. It was a farcical report. And Ann Coulter alluded to in her article, only 2, she said in her article, there are only 2 reports that have ever been made about speeding to show why there's a disparate number of blacks that are being stopped and whites being stopped. They did 2 studies of it. One of them I've seen, where they simply went behind the numbers and they wanted to do a scientific study. They put cameras up, and over a period of time, the cameras picked up who was going by and who was speeding, and they found out that the person that was speeding were the numbers, the statistics were consistent in their scientific data collection as would have been put on the record by the stoppage, and it was very consistent with what the persons found to be the case. What was the case in those reports, and that was that blacks were speeding more than whites. And in fact is that when you look at the statistics over the nation, across the nation, you find that the statistics in Ferguson are not that at variance with what the statistics are throughout the country. So we either have to make a conclusion that all the police forces are racist, or there's a finding that's consistent with what you found in Ferguson. And this idea that you can automatically conclude, which is just a certain amount of genuflecting that takes place, that racism explains it, comes out of a view that's being passed out here, this noise being passed out, that America is a racist society. And I am not buying that either. I am buying that there has been racism in America, but I want to locate what racism has been. And the only racism that really has any utilitarian basis for having to be responded to, and that is government racism. And I'll explain that if we have to about what I mean by that. Because all this racism that people are dealing with, the latest example of which is the students at Oklahoma University, that is moving from made-up racism to meaningless racism. Because singing on a bus and an environment where people are singing, I'm just like Ann Coulter on this point as well, and that is what were they doing? Trying to cut a rap tape Was that what they were doing? Is that the injury? If so, then let's go and talk about Kanye West and Snoop Dogg and all these rap artists who are doing that and doing it in front of our face, not on a bus somewhere, but doing it out in public, and people are dancing to it. I am not concerned about what somebody was singing about on a bus somewhere. I'll tell you what I am concerned about, and I'll get back to this idea of whether or not it's possible to racially profile somebody, because that's noise too. And when I say that on these programs with these liberals, they want to come out here with this you don't know what you're talking about and blah, 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 as if they know what they're talking about. I really don't enjoy going on programs with liberals, and I don't even have a conversation with them, quite frankly, other than read my notes. And when if I'm at a different a place where I have my bags after the discussion's over, they can get my bags for me. But I really don't like to engage liberals, particularly on issues of race, because I find the noise that they make is a waste of my time. But this idea that numbers can explain race, you use numbers to explain that there's a racial decision making that is taking place that's in back of the numbers, explain the numbers. You need to have data that would justify that claim, and that is to go and see if in fact that is what is taking place. Is there speeding that goes on more so in these areas, urban areas in particular, where there's another kind of circumstance that kicks in? The question is whether or not there is a kind of respect that you would have in those urban communities that they would have if they're driving somewhere else. I mean, I see a lot of people driving in Ohio, and I'll tell you what they do there. If they got a Michigan tag on, I think we pretty much know driving through Ohio, they're looking for you because they know the mentality of Michigan drivers. And the mentality is that we think that if the speed limit is 70, that means 75. And in many places, it means 80, depending on whether or not you think anybody's down the street waiting on you to clock your speed. But when you go into Ohio, I can tell you right now, a lot of Michigan people get tickets down there because we think that 70 means 75. And I was stopped one time in Ohio myself, and I was very proud of myself because I was only doing 5 miles over the speed limit. So when the guy came back, I passed by him, and I didn't even hit the brakes. I didn't think I was doing a thing that was not customary because, normally they kind of cut you some slack here in Michigan. You do 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. They kind of smile at you as you speed by them. So now I'm in Ohio, and this car pulls in back of me. I saw him as I passed by him, but I didn't hit the brakes. And he pulled out in back of me, and I continued my speed limit at the level where I was speeding. And he stopped me, pulled me over. And he came to the window, and he said, I clock you speeding. And I said, well, I was doing, and I told him what speed I was doing. And he said very sternly, the speed limit is so-and-so. And I quoted 5 miles over that. And he wanted me to know that that was the speed limit and not the speed limit I was doing. He didn't give me a ticket because I was, I was reasonable in the way I approached him. I was respectful in the tone of voice I used and certain things you do in order to avoid any further need to raise the level of the confrontation. The confrontation is him stopping you. Now, if you raise it above that, you got some other problem you're creating. So I was, very mannerable in my my responding to his having stopped me. I didn't get out of the car and start, woofing and doing all these things I see these people doing. I didn't try to grab his weapon either. I didn't try to grab his weapon, and that was a plus. I made sure that would not be a problem. And it ended up with him not giving me a ticket, but told me the speed limit was et cetera, et cetera. And he followed me for a few miles to see if I was going to, have was it a teachable moment or a moment of reinforcing the teachable moment. And when he found out it was a teachable moment, I recognized what he was saying, and I started doing the speed limit. And he followed me maybe about 5 miles. and there was nothing to see here. So he cut off the pursuit and went elsewhere to somebody that maybe was doing 10 miles over the speed limit. And so they didn't pull me back to the station. But sometimes I've gone back to the station. Because when they set the speed limit in Ohio at a certain rate, then that's what they mean. And they mean it more there than they do here. So it's a kind of like a driving situation. And I didn't feel like I was being racially profiled when that happened. Now, if they're stopping more blacks going through Ohio than they're stopping whites, I'll tell you this. Ohio doesn't care. I've seen people pull over because they didn't get it coming out of Michigan. Got a blue tag, you got your Michigan tag, and they know the mentality here, and they're stopping you. So I'm not buying that is a matter. The numbers in and of themselves prove racial profiling, and I look at it through the lens of Thomas Sowell, who called it the disparate impact racket, because there's a disparate impact in terms of blacks and whites that can be explained through racism. I'm not buying that, and it was even in Larry Elder had one that was had an article that was even more forceful than that. You call it the report farcical, and it is a farcical report. Go and read the report and see what Eric Holder did. They realized they had egg on their face by having made all these comments out here. Eric Holder going to Ferguson talking about some experience he had when he was a teenager, and he could feel their pain, and I know this is racism. And then he had egg on his face. And that's why they held up. If you go back and look at it, they had completed the 86-page report before they had done the larger report of 105 pages, and they held off in making the report, the 86-page report, public because they wanted to bring it out into the public at the same time that they're making this denunciation of the Ferguson police. And I'm telling you something: people have lost their jobs because of this farce that was put out by this man over the claim that race explains what is taking place. Now, there are people stopped on the street who are innocent of having done anything in the stoppage. But to call that racial profiling as opposed to individual profiling of that individual, I just want people to tell me how you racially profiling if there's no profile that fits the race. All profiling is individuated.
Okay, I guess from now on, in areas largely black populations, in large black cities, they have a crime problem. Okay, so I guess from now on, police officers are only supposed to go after whites and Asians because they're going to be the perpetrator of crimes, not the people who live in that community. They never do. I mean, and then they'll turn around. The black community activists will turn around and say, you don't police our communities enough. You don't care enough. You don't care if we die. I mean, it's like, so when the cops do try to show the presence there, and I'm not a pro cop. I mean, believe me, I've had serious issues with Flint police and pretty much any police department I go to. Because, see, they have most people go to become cops do have a strong authoritarian bent.
Of course.
And they want to become, they'll work as a cop. They'd work as a cop if they were independently wealthy, and they'd do it for free. They just want to bust people. I mean, that's my mindset. I don't see them being these great public servants. I never have. Mm-hmm. I've never seen them do the job that everybody I talked to said cops are supposed to do. Protect and serve. Well, I saw that as a joke. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of cops in Flint be abusive of their own wives and beat the hell out of them. I mean, I've seen them treat their kids like crap, mm-hmm. And so I just didn't say, I didn't have this idealized platform to look at, police officers are our friends. I never said that. Most of them I've dealt with were drunk and using drugs, mm-hmm. And I mean, come on, we had a shootout in the parking lot over our Flint when I was a kid between two cops, mm-hmm. who were shooting each other. So I have a real issue with police. I mean, and the whole mindset, see, a lot of conservatives have a tendency to, cops are our friends and they're law and order, and guess what? Maybe the law is wrong. I mean, the law could be wrong, or their way of enforcing it could be wrong. So, but I just like to know what the black community activists, the radical ones like Sharpton and Jackson and all these. I mean, what would you want? I mean, you want police presence. You just want black cops in black communities. Is that all you're saying? So I guess you're racial profiling whites.
That's another point made in another article that Ellison wrote in terms of profiling white police officers. I think we have to look at that as an issue as well. But what Sharpton and Jesse Jackson want is they want the provocation, because without the confrontation that are taking place between blacks and police, what are they going to do? Except be what they are, which is obsolete, archaic relics of the past that are making a claim that racism is blocking blacks in this country when that is so far removed from reality and has not been reality since 1965.
You know, I'd like to put a challenge out. I don't know if you would be on board for it. I'll just get some. I'll do the host myself. I'd like to put a challenge out to Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson for a Bible quiz bowl. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they know any scriptures, because they're supposed to be these ministers, and yet they teach totally opposite of what Scripture I know teaches, and yet they're considered reverend, or people have. I mean, I guess Jackson was defrocked a few years ago. His credentials are stripped from him, but Sharpton still Reverend Sharpton, that I know. I'd try to challenge him. I mean, I'd bone up on the Bible for a couple of months to make sure I wasn't being too cocky, but I think I could probably score pretty decently against these guys who are supposed to be men of the cloth. You know?
John, I watched Al Sharpton as he preached I guess you have to say he was preaching the sermon over at the funeral of Michael Brown in Ferguson, and he opened the Bible up, and I think he read one or two verses, but he didn't make any reference to it once he read it. He went on and started talking about how the police were wrong, and they won round one, but later on he would say that the grand jury report means that Ferguson won round one, but don't cut the gloves off just yet, and all this nonsense. But he didn't actually say anything about the Bible, because they're just using that as a cover for what they really are, and what Sharpton is and what Jesse Jackson is. These are two race hustlers. Jesse, you go back and read these people's history, as I have read, and I'm very much aware of before Al Sharpton, the man who would be Jesse, according to the book called The Head Negro in Charge Syndrome, written by Kelly, a very good book. Norman Kelly wrote a book called The Head Negro in Charge Syndrome, and he calls Sharpton the person that would be Jesse. And all he's doing is just repeating the same thing that Jesse Jackson did. Jesse Jackson gets out here, and he's the leader of Black America, the singular person you go to when there's a situation between blacks and whites. Then he's the go-to guy. So now that once was Jesse Jackson, people got tired of him. So now it's Al Sharpton who stepped up on the stage. How many years would that be after Jesse Jackson was crowned? Jesse Jackson was crowned in '68 after lying about what he did after King was killed, claiming he held King's head in his. He was the last one to talk to King alive, and he held cradled King's head. And when King lay mortally wounded on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel, he was the one to ask him. I guess he had seen these John Wayne pictures. Doc, can you hear me? And he had that conversation. He's lying about that. And in fact, Ralph Abernathy was there. I think they were in room 306. I knew it on the third floor, either room 306 or room 316 at the Lorraine Hotel. And outside of that room, that's where King was mortally wounded, and Jesse was not even on that balcony. And he claims that he was holding and cradling Martin Luther King's head, and went and I know this for a fact because it was seen by and reported in the book written by Andy Young, who saw Jesse Jackson do it after they had removed King's body, and that is he went and put his hand in King's blood and wiped it on his shirt. And then went to the city council. I went to the either the city council, I think it was the city council in Chicago, and claimed that either that or he went to Springfield, one of the two, and he claimed that the blood on his shirt was the blood that he had in cradling King's head, and that's the blood that he had, the martyr's blood on him, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you what Andy Young said about it, because I read all the. You see, you can. I wish talking about debating. You, John, I wish these person come here and debate what they did. Jesse Jackson claims that he cradled Dr. King's head. I'll tell you who he did not say that to, And that was Ralph Abernathy that challenged Jesse Jackson to say that to him on the Phil Donahue show. They went on the show together, but what Ralph Abernathy said was that he would not say that to him. And when Donahue asked Abernathy, well, how did Jesse Jackson get the blood on his shirt? And Ralph Abernathy said, tongue in cheek, well, he could have cut himself shaving. He could have pricked his finger, or something of that nature. What he did say is that there was not blood on his shirt because what Jesse Jackson said, because that's not what happened. The one that cradled Dr. King and went to the funeral home, went to the hospital with Dr. King and later on to the funeral home and never left his side was Ralph Abernathy. What Jesse was doing was getting in front of the press, trying to act like he had been appointed to be the leader in Dr. King's place. And that's a whole story about that. I know all of that in terms of what occurred. But I'm just trying to make the larger issue is that Jesse Jackson is a racial charlatan, and so is Al Sharpton. These people are race hustlers. And they look forward to these kinds of situations, which is why they've never told blacks how to respond when you're stopped. They've never said to these blacks, when you stop, for example, make sure that your hands are visible. Because the officer doesn't know you from Adam. Turn your light on inside the car, make everything visible, make sure you're not posing a threat or even can be seen as posing a threat. Don't reach for your billfold and make any innocent move that you know what you're doing, but you're not explaining what you're doing to others. And do the same thing you do if you're going to the dentist's office. He's going to give you a shot in the dentist's office. He's not going to shoot you with a bullet. He's going to shoot you with Novocaine. But when you go in there, tell him what medication you're on. Why? Because he needs to have that information. Because he put that he's shooting you with Novocaine, and that could have a reaction to other medicine you're taking. Well, you do that in the dentist's office, and he's not shooting with any bullets. You share the information with him to make sure that you're all on the same page with the information. When you get ready to reach for your wallet, you know you're reaching for your wallet. But he said you pulling out something black, and he doesn't know what you're doing. But you want to make sure that he doesn't misconstrue your purpose and think you're pulling a gun out, which is what happened to in New York, where people say, well, he was only reaching for his billfold. He pulls out something black and he starts shooting. And you start talking about, well, he fired 41 bullets. Yeah, that's like, pull the trigger down until you fall. And you got 2 or 3 officers shooting. That's what, 3 seconds. And they're not taking any chances. But they're not shooting because they want to mow you down because you're black. And I like to see some statistics on the number of people stopped that are white and the number of persons stopped in Ferguson that are Asians. Let me see that statistic. I guarantee you what you'll find in most of these places here where you have these statistics between whites and Asians. And that is whites are stopped at a higher level. And they also, if you're talking about, they want to make profiling that they're not loaning black people money because they're black and so on and so forth and they can't get a loan. Well, I looked at those statistics and I can tell you this, that whites can get loans do not get loans at a higher rate than Asians. So then you got to make the claim then that if you want to make it a racial issue, then you got to say then that white bankers are discriminating against whites who are the same in the same racial group that they are. And that's a claim that makes no sense. That whites are discriminating against whites because they're white and they're white themselves. You have to look beyond the statistics to find out what else is there to explain the disparate numbers. And that's why Sewell calls it a disparate impact racket. It is a racket. And that racket was engaged in by Holder.
Banker types are fixated by color. I'll grant you that. It's green, okay? If you got the ability to pay back at a certain rate, they're going to give you that loan because they want that money coming in back to them at that certain rate. So that's all it's about, okay?
Yeah, I have no problem going to get a loan because, one of the things I do, I understand how credit operates. I know it's about credit. And what I do in credit is that I have learned how to do credit. I use credit, but I use it to the disadvantage of the creditor. I have two credit cards, and as soon as one bill comes in, for me to pay that in 25 days, that's yeah. What they it used to be 30 days. Like for example, I got a card. I won't tell you which one it is. I'm not trying to grow any business for these guys. I just use them because their card pays me 1% on every dollar that I spend. So I get a penny. They give me a penny on every dollar that I spend on their cards. That's why I use them. But I'm not going to advertise for them. But what they used to do is that they used to have the ending of the period ending on the 10th of the month. And that's when they give you the bill of when it's due. The 10th is due the 10th of the next month. Now what they do is they get you to pay on the card on the 5th of the month, but you continue to charge on the credit card for an additional 5 days. So what they did was they have lowered the number of days that you have to pay the bill off, but you're actually charging on the card for 30 days, but you have to pay within 25 days. So they changed that, and they changed in order to get more revenue. I understand what they're doing, but understand what I'm doing and what you have to do yourselves. And that is understand how credit operates. I pay those guys back before I pay them back when it's due, on the day it's due, and I pay the whole bill off. Now what I've done there is I've used their money for 25 days. I've expended upon my own income during that period of time. I have my own money put aside somewhere else, maybe trying to grow some interest somewhere. And I'm using their money at no interest charged to me for the use of their money, paying it off at the due date and paying it off in total. And I've expended my income by the amount of money that I charged at no cost to myself. Now, they don't expect you to do that. But by doing that, my credit is A1 okay. I go to the bank, they can hardly wait to give me a loan because they know they're going to get the money back, but they don't know that they're not going to get an interest rate. If they knew that I'm going to get it at no interest, I don't know if they'd be so happy to loan it to me. And I'm getting ready to do some work in my house, as a matter of fact, and I have 12 months. I asked them this question: is it 12 months same as cash? And the amount of money that it's going to cost me to have this work done is quite substantial, but they don't understand what my game plan is. My game plan is that I'm going to go up to the date in which is due 12 months, same as cash, and then at the very last minute, I'm going to pay the whole bill off. But I'm going to use that money, and I'm going to use my money that I should pay this bill for 12 months, and then pay it off before there's any interest accrued on the indebtedness. And they like that because they know they get their money back. And that's what I was telling you earlier, that when they look at the credit rate between blacks and whites, there's a disparity between the two. But there's also a disparity between the rate in which money is paid back between whites and Asians. And when they go to the Asian population, we know they're sticklers for paying off their debt because of the way their culture operates. I mean, I have people tell me, in traveling abroad, they say they go to Japan, they say you can't even find a gum wrapper on the floor. But that's because of the culture of the Japanese. And did you notice when they had that tsunami over there and that earthquake that opened up businesses and buildings were falling apart and windows were open and all of that? There was not any looting in Japan because that's their culture. And they compared that with what happened in Ferguson, where there were no windows broke out. They broke the windows out. And then look what happened after the windows were broken.
And another thing is, too, is a lot of
That's a culture issue.
A lot of sociologists will say, well, that's because there's a great disparity here in America between the rich and the poor and the class system. There's a very strong demarc point between the classes in Japan, too. Mm-hmm. There's a group almost like considered untouchable in Japan. Yeah. And people don't want to, but the thing is, they still don't have this criminality going on.
No, they don't, John. And they have these, they have this excuse making that emboldens. What page is that in that book by C.F. Bonnet, the French writer, called Ruins of Empire? It's page 166 of his book. If it's on that page, you embolden. He talks about emboldening people. And these kinds of excuses embolden people to think that they're licensed to do it because, look, this is what the circumstances that they caused it. But I've seen poverty. I've seen poverty much greater than the poverty I see right now in any part of the city of Flint. I mean, I saw poverty where if you didn't come together in your community and share your resources, then you didn't have anything until your food came in, your government commodities came in. And my family is one of those recipients. My mother worked, but the government would make up the difference between your own effort and the effort beyond your means. They would give you some. They wouldn't give you the money, which I think that was a great thing. They wouldn't give you the money. You had to go out and earn the money for other things, but because you had to apply the money on your rent and pay your water bill and your gas bill, and sometimes you had to finagle which one of those you're going to pay. The government would give you the money. You had to kind of go out there and do some things on your own. But they would subsidize effort, so and which I think is a good thing. Subsidize effort, but don't come in here subsidizing subsidizing people sitting around doing nothing. And you had to accommodate the person next door, the family next door, because when their food ran out, then they came to your house, and that's the kind of community we were in with no income of any. High level. We couldn't say that we were anywhere near middle class. And I think there was one TV set, I think at that time, in the whole neighborhood. I mean, you didn't have TV sets in every room now. You didn't have TV sets in every house. You had one TV set in the whole neighborhood. and I can tell you this, nobody's going in that house and get that TV set and take it somewhere else because we're all looking for that guy. We got to watch The Lone Ranger. And Tano, that's a co-star. And a lot of other movies. We liked the cowboy pictures, and that was we had a meeting place that we would meet at this house, and that's what we would do, sitting around the one TV set in the neighborhood watching the TV set. And we were poor. But I'll tell you what we had in that neighborhood. We had values in that neighborhood. And I've said this on the air a couple of times now, and that was that in that neighborhood, they would put the food outside the stores, and everybody in the neighborhood was poor. And they put the food outside the stores because what they were doing is going from one store to the other, making the delivery so they could do it in a certain amount of time. And they would leave the food outside. Cereal, it wouldn't be anything that was spoiled. And they brought the milk to your house, by the way, and the orange juice. That they didn't have the way of saving the milk on the shelves like they do right now. And they now have a shelf life, but at that time they delivered the milk to your house because there was no shelf life of the milk. So I don't know what they're doing to milk right now to create that, but I can tell you what they did before. If the milk was not in the can, they brought it to your house and laid it on your front porch. And they would say, "Milkman, you go out there and get it immediately and put it in the refrigerator." But they put the food outside that would not spoil. They wouldn't put meat out there. They put bread and cereal and all those kinds of things outside the store. And I've seen people walk by I've seen poor people walk by that food outside the store, and no one would take it. And the reason wouldn't take it because they had not paid for it, and beyond not having paid for it, they had values that told them that was wrong, and they would not do it, although they were poor. And what we would do in my household and many other households, we didn't have the money the night before to go and pay for anything when the store was open. But the next morning, my mother would have the money. And she would give me 21 cents. That was the cost of bread. It cost 20 cents. That was a penny tax. And I go up there and put 21 cents in the bread box and take the bread out and take it home. And we'd have toast before we went to school that morning. We'd have my breakfast was a cup of coffee and a cheese toast, a toast of cheese. Because the government would give you cheese, you slice the cheese, you had to slice it real thin, where it would melt, and then you put the butter, they gave you butter also, you put the butter on the outside of the toast, and you toast it on one side, and it would heat up, the toast, the cheese is melting, turn the other side, and melt some more, and you got your sandwich for breakfast before going to school, and you had the toast because you went up there and got the bread when you had the money to pay for it.
You know that cheese that my friends used to get it, and they used to trade us for stuff like money. So we used to buy blocks. That was like 5-10 pound blocks we used to get of the welfare cheese they call it. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you looked at the printing of it, that was made by Land of Lakes.
Oh,
That was
I
a
didn't know
name
that.
company that was
Uh-huh.
making it. Well, the USDA purchases, you know, crops and stuff from people and produce, from basically they subsidize it that way. They pay them so they get that produce, the product of the farmers,
Yeah.
and so that's what they used to do. I mean, if you actually look at it, we're still subsidizing farmers, but now the money's not going. That's now they're actually producing a product that's being bought by a middleman or the processor who puts it on the shelves in the supermarket. A person with a bridge card goes and purchases it. They're still, basically they're still getting, the farmers are still getting subsidized for actually not producing. So I mean, if you actually look at it, they should cut that subsidization out because it's coming from the taxpayers.
Without any question. And
So,
John, and that was very good cheese they were putting out there. I read somewhere just the other day that they're only required to have 52% of the cheese product to be cheese. They're putting other things in it now that are fillers, but that was very good cheese. And we were very poor, but we had the values that you see over in Japan, and not these values we see now in places like Ferguson, where they went in there and just raided these stores. That could never happen in my neighborhood because you were representing in my neighborhood, and the first question they would ask you when you were doing something that was untoward in the community, which they knew your parents would not be in line with. They knew your parents would stand against it, and they would ask you in my neighborhood, whose boy are you? They want to know who were raising you, because they had this idea in the community that fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree, and if you were representing your parents like that, who are your parents? They want to know. They want to know that, and I didn't want to be out there, and others didn't too. Didn't want to be out there representing your parents in a way in which it would reflect badly upon them and your community, because that was ostracism in my community, and that's why they walked by that bread box or that cereal box. If they didn't have the money to put in there to get the bread out or the cereal out of there, they wouldn't take it because it didn't belong to them. And the ones putting it out there before the store opened knew they would not take it out of there, and that's why they would do that. They did it because they knew the values were in place. It's not about the poverty. You can go read many of these things about these tenement houses, like Sowell writes about the tenement that he was in Harlem, and what they would do on hot nights, they go up there and sleep on the top of the housing complex, up there, where on top of it on the tenement houses, because that's where it was the coolest at that point. They come out of their apartments and they would go up there and sleep and bring their mattress up there and sleep outdoors. You try that right now and see what happens. But that has nothing to do with the poverty rate, because we've seen poverty that trumps anything we're seeing right now. In fact, the poverty today in America, quite frankly, is the poverty that the kings, like King James I, who only had one pair of breeches, they didn't call it breeches, they call it breeches, breeches, one pair of breeches, and had to wash that out every day. And because the cotton and all of that. I mean, look at the cotton that was being sold on the market and even king. So the kings didn't have all that much. And what you have right now, I don't know of anybody that doesn't have. I mean, they talk about people that's on government assistance. They got jacuzzis, and I read those reports. And I haven't been in any home that didn't have at least at least one television set, and most of them have more than that, because you got to have one for, the children can't get along on what they want to watch, so you got to make sure he has a television set in his room, and she's got to have one in her room because they watch different programs. You got to have different TV sets. We didn't have that. We had poverty that was much worse than that, what they call poverty today. This poverty here, quite frankly, based upon my community when I was growing up, is middle class today. I mean, you can't import it back in the it's middle class. It's not middle class now, but it was middle class back in the time period before they inflated the currency. And that's why it's not middle class today, because the currency has been inflated. But back in that time period, you didn't have what you have right now. And you had to have values, otherwise you would have had chaos in that community. Because with the poverty that I saw, and you had the values you have right now, nobody would be safe. Yet those communities were safe. I was safe in my community. My mom wanted us to come home when the street lights came on, but that's because my mom didn't want us out and at dark. But we be out there at dark. We knew to come home, but when we didn't come home, we didn't have to run anywhere because nobody was going to endanger us in that community. And that was and I can't buy the poverty causes what I'm seeing right now. What I saw in Ferguson cannot be attributed to poverty, because poverty is nothing new in these communities. And maybe in Ferguson it may be new. I don't think it is. But I've seen communities much worse than what I saw in Ferguson. There was no store. If you looted, I saw a lot of stores in Ferguson being looted. If you were in my neighborhood, I'm talking about in the place where I live, there were two grocery stores, and I know both of them. And I'd go from one to the other, and I would get one price of what I would buy there, and go to the other one around the corner and buy there. And the guy would ask me where I got the bread from, because I'm buying the bread somewhere, and he'd get mad because I didn't buy the bread from him, and would tell me to go back and buy it from where I got it from, and so on and so forth. But he knew I didn't steal it, because that's not the way the community operated. And he knew that if I had the bread, I had paid for it. Just I didn't pay for it in his store. He didn't ask me, did you pay for that bread? He didn't ask me that question. He asked me where had I bought the bread. He assumed it had been purchased, because that's the kind of neighborhood it was. And they did not live in that neighborhood. They had a store in that neighborhood. They didn't live in that neighborhood, but they knew how that neighborhood operated. And if I had bread in my hand, and I was getting ready to walk out of his store with it, he knew I had paid for it. Had no question about that, because you were not going to go in that store and walk out with something you hadn't paid for. So poverty doesn't explain it. And this racial profiling we're claiming right now, I didn't hear racial profiling when I was coming up. I never heard the term as a young boy growing up and later on a teenager growing up. I never heard anyone talking about profiling. In fact, what would happen if you had an incident with a police officer, what they would do a lot of times, if you had a grandfather in the household or your mom and dad were there, what they would do is take you back to your parents. Because they knew what was going to happen once your parents found out that you were doing some things down the street that you shouldn't have been doing. And that's just not the police officer. All the people in the community were doing that. And they weren't profiling either. They were looking at behavior, and they were pointing it out, and they were enforcing the rules of the community. And I didn't hear profiling from anybody when I was growing up. That's something that's been created right now. And I'll come back to what I said at the beginning of the program. I do not buy that that's possible to do racial profiling. All profiling is individuated. And if it's not true, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll run an experiment of our own. We'll make it scientific. We'll put 5 young people out here walking down the street and got their pants on the ground. And we'll see what the reaction is to those 5 individuals looking that way, presenting themselves that way in public. And we will bring them back. Don't change their race. Don't do any skin lightening of those persons. And have them coming back wearing different clothing. Let's say they put them all in shirts and ties. And bring them back and let them walk down the same street. And we'll see what the reaction is to them at that point. Their race has not changed. I can guarantee you that the response to them will be different. And so this idea that they are being racially profiled, why would they get, and I'm saying the reaction will be different to them in the 2 different circumstances that I've talked about, then what would explain that? Certainly their race doesn't explain it, because their race is unchanged. And we're calling it racial profiling because that's the going rate right now to where we can claim black victimization. I was saying on another program on same program that and the same person took exception to this claim, but I made a claim on my wall before coming to the studio today, and you can read that on Facebook. I will make this claim, and I will defend this claim, and that is that Muslims do not come here to be Muslims. So all of a sudden, that's interpreted me saying that they have no right to be Muslims here. And that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they were Muslims where they came from. They came here to be Americans. But when they came here, they found what Ayn Rand says in the book called The New Intellectuals, when she talked about the looters, when they got here, they found the front door open to a people that have lost what made this country great. It's on your money, by the way. E pluribus unum. That doesn't mean that we're stopping you from being what you are. What we're doing is putting what you are in a cultural blender, out of which which comes out that you're American. And what that means is that you be what you are and be proud of what you are, but you ain't doing the Pledge of Allegiance in Arabic.
Well, another thing is too, I always thought too. I mean, my mom's family is Hungarian, and that's pretty recently. And so I hate when all these liberals will call me, like, when I don't want to, like, I don't like unfettered immigration. They say, well, your family came somewhere. I mean, like, self-righteously, I know that. But the thing is, my family was Roman Catholic Hungarians. They came over here and they got harassed by the Klan. They right just 2 blocks away from the studio. Mm-hmm. They got crosses burnt right in their front lawn. Okay, but the thing is, we came here and we learned how to speak English, because that's what we're asking for. 2 things that make an American is our laws and our concept of freedom, which is to intertwine, and the language. Learn those 2, abide by them, and you can become an American. You can enjoy the benefits of having all these potential markets and clients and customers out there, so you can make your money, so you can realize the material side of the American dream. Mm-hmm. But don't come here and expect me to learn Hindi or Arabic or the dialects of Urdu or whatever. Don't expect me and everybody else to go run out, get Rosetta Stone for all these things to welcome you. Okay. I mean, and I'm so tired of people saying, well, you don't speak another language. Maybe I'm missing out. But I have tried to study Arabic. I've learned a little bit of Koine Greek. I do know some Hungarian and German, Spanish, Latin, and some other language I could look up. I could piece it together, parse it together. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what else am I supposed to learn? I'm within my own country. Okay, but the 2 things we require is the language and respect for the laws. Is that too much to ask for great unfettered potential?
It is for these political correct people that want the country to accommodate those who are coming to the country because of the kind of country that we have. They didn't come here, as I said on this program. I was not saying, first of all, they hear what you're not saying. I wasn't saying that they don't have the right to be Muslims here. They have every right. That would be as much nonsense as saying what I was pointing out on my wall today. The nonsense of saying that Islam is a religion of peace. That's nonsense, and I would be saying nonsense if I said that they have no right to be Muslims in this country. That would be nonsense as well. I'm not saying they don't have a right to be Muslims. What I'm saying is that what I'm saying on the one hand is Islam is not a religion of peace, never has been, and you can't show where that's true right now. So what people do is get off on a tangent on that. They start talking about how many people are Muslims that are peaceful. That's not that's a different conversation.
I'd like to know what religion is a religion of peace. Hinduism isn't. Buddhism's had periods of violence in it. Christianity certainly has. Christianity's never. I mean, pacifism is not inherent in Christianity. Being ridiculous and going insane when somebody says something that offends you, that's stupid. Okay, so Christianity teaches against that, but it never carte blanche, admonishes its followers not to fight. It never says that. Totally, they take it totally out of context. And Islam is certainly not a religion of peace. So I don't know anybody. Religion that tells you to divorce yourself for the possibility of having to do violence is a religion that's not going to go anywhere. I mean, there's a sect of Hinduism that's so extreme that they have to wear masks because they don't want to swallow any microbes or anything and destroy them, and they have to sweep everything under their feet because they don't want to damage any insect. I mean, what can you do being that so circumspect? You can't.
John, the thing that really gets you is that they say it at the most inopportune times when that is least true based upon the example in the environment which is being said. For example, when they had 911, Bush couldn't hardly wait to get out of the White House to go to the nearest mosque and tell them that Islam is a religion of peace. Well, they just got through bombing the Trade Center in New York. And to make a claim like that in that type of environment shows cowardice. So anyway, I was writing on my post before I came to the studio today, and I was saying that it is nonsense to say that Islam is a religion of peace, and it's even a change in the conversation of what I'm saying here. To tell me what Keith Ellison, the Muslim representative No problem with that. And from Minnesota, and the former basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who want to tell me that ISIS is no more Islamic than the Ku Klux Klan, as if that disavows that this is a Muslim group because the Klan is being disavowed, is nonsense. I was listening to, I'll give you one example. I was listening to Assad last night on 60 Minutes. I never heard Assad, who has a problem with ISIS, say they're not Islamic. The only place I hear this claim that the problem with them is they're not Islamic is in the West. They don't make that claim in the Middle East. In other words, if to make the claim that ISIS is not Islamic, they would have to do this. They would have to make the claim that the Shia and the Sunni are not Muslims.
I guess, Courtney, if you follow this,
Because that's where the factionalism began.
if you want to look at this, the liberals' way of looking at things, then we shouldn't. A Christian American never should go to war against a potential Christian European in the First or Second World War, because that's like going against their own co-religionist. But it wasn't the conflict. It wasn't the conflict of Christianity. Wasn't the conflict. What it was is actually the violation of Christianity, the Christian morality about not murdering people, especially during the Holocaust. So I mean, it's ridiculous for that. We didn't disavow though and say, "Oh, they're not Christians." We never. That wasn't even brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, we were bombing churches, during our air raids over Germany and stuff.
Yes, they were.
So we're bombing churches.
You use a church in World War II, and you're hiding on that church comes down. It is a target in war. If you don't want those places bombed, don't hide in them.
Okay, and if if we do anything against anybody's Muslim potential, then why are we fighting for? Why were we fighting for Kuwait against Iraq? Mm-hmm. I mean, why were we doing that?
That's the only time we will point out that we are fighting against Muslims when we can, because we don't want the accusation that we are Islamic foe, as they call it. You see, there are even subtle things we are doing right now to show we are capitulating, and it's not just in terms of what we're talking about here. Look at the use of AD and BC. I was writing about this on my wall today, that this idea that we're going to talk about the common era, common to who? BCE and CE, common era and BCE. Okay, fine. The first date on the Muslim calendar is in the Christian group is 622 AD. That comes out to 1 AH on the Muslim calendar. In other words, their calendar starts at 1 AH and goes up from there. So they are around 1300, 1400 and something on their calendar, because it starts out 600 years after the Christian calendar starts out in the AD period. So now to accommodate that, we want to now say CE and BCE rather than saying BC and AD. BC being before Christ and AD meaning Anno Domini in the year of our Lord. But go and see if they have any combination of the Christian dating and the Muslim calendar dating. See if they say anything about 622 or 2015, and they're talking about the AD period, and they're writing that down in their books. They're not going to accommodate, because they have their own way of using the calendar from the Muslim persuasion. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because you have the right to do that as a people that are self-determining. But this country was self-determining before it became endowed, before it began to endow itself with all this political correctness that's involved in right now. And that is trying to accommodate itself with Islam, and we've lost our way to our detriment. Okay, well, we got to get out of here. But we'll finish. I wanted to talk about this book as well, but we'll do that next week. But I want you to read my post on Facebook, because I did the title of it is Islam is a religion of violence, and it poses a threat to Western civilization. I want you to go on that post and argue with me on that post, because I made some very strong claims there. Okay, got to get out of here. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. And not just next week, but continue to follow your dream at all times. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.